In the previous 2 episodes in this series, we've looked at Bawtry Viaduct and Bawtry Railway Station.
And in this final episode, we uncover what is left of the old Bawtry to Haxey Light Railway, a line that's only lasted 50 years and which has left but faint traces on the landscape. We begin our journey just north of where the old Bawtry Railway Station once stood. I do think we have some repurposed railway sleepers here in what is now a veterinary surgery, but you can still see the holes from where the rails were driven in. And I think we have a wall here from the old platform, I think, that took the line off to Misson and then Haxey. Actually, it has more look of a platform. Maybe the platform was actually up there, behind this fence. So, highly delighted to have found our first evidence of the Bawtry to Haxey Light Railway. Let's go up the line and see what we can find next. If we leave Bawtry in a north-easterly direction, you can see the existing line to our left here, but there are some high embankments which show us where the old Bawtry and Haxey Light Railway was, quite steep embankments you can see there on either side. So after walking a couple of hundred yards, the eagle-eyed Dawn spotted something really impressive in terms of the remains of the old railway. So what she found was some bolts driven into some concrete in the ground, and on closer inspection of the bolts they said LNER on them, or London and North Eastern Railway, the name of the company that ran the railway in the decades before it closed. Further evidence in this clearing, perhaps an old signal box, perhaps a signal point. And by comparing what we found on the ground with this map from 1950, we confirm it was an actual signal point. So moving in a northerly direction, you can see the embankment there from the old railway line, but there are no boards or any information to say anything about the history of this short-lived railway. So unlike many old railway lines we've come across, this particular embankment is broken and disjointed. You can find parts of it and then suddenly you lose the track. There were some additional lines going off into the sidings here at the brickworks near Austerfield, and here is an aerial photograph from the 1930s where you can see where those lines were. So a little bit further along, we've got the final bit of embankment here before it comes out across the main Thorn Road, the A614, between Bawtry and Finningley. So now thinking the line followed this thicket of trees, there's a road here, an access road, and there's a path towards a school study centre. I'm thinking this line of trees, this thicket, was where the actual line came out onto the main road. So here we go, we come out here, across the main road and carry on our journey to Misson in that direction. However, on closer inspection of an old map, you can see the line actually went under the road by means of a tunnel, and that was confirmed by some old accounts we read of people who lived in the area. So from Austerfield, the line went in an easterly direction, but if you look on today's map, there is no public access to where the line used to go. So at the point here, about 200 yards on from Austerfield, where the line came across these fields, but now is being completely dismantled, demolished, whichever other word you want, and there's no trace remaining at all. That clip was filmed at this point on the map, so all this bit of line leading eastwards is completely obliterated from the surface of the earth. And the point where the line disappears also happens to be the border between Yorkshire and Nottinghamshire. Old line here, out of bounds and well overgrown. This site is not intended for recreational use at all. So for the next section, we can see the remains of a line but not actually walk or run on it. So across that field, you can see the embankment of the line. And on the far side of the embankment was this little siding, which I believe was known as Oats Siding because there were some works there. This charming little drawing of that siding was taken from a book by a man called Jack Smith, who remembered riding on this railway as a young boy in the 1930s. So about half a mile out of Misson here, we've got, I think, the old line there, very overgrown. We've got a walkable, runnable footpath next to it, and then the line heading off to Misson. So one of the big questions is, why was this railway built? Well, originally it was going to be known as the Tickhill Light Railway and carry coal from the mines there all the way to Haxey and on to Goole and the River Humber. However, it was never used for coal use and it became an agricultural sideline. Very little used and most goods stopping at Misson. It was alleged that the track was taken up between Misson and Haxey, but we can't find any documentary evidence to verify that. It said that some wagons were kept at Haxey and brought down the line, but the line was eventually closed in the mid-1960s.
In 8 miles, this railway went through 3 counties: Nottinghamshire, Lincolnshire and Yorkshire.
I wonder if this metal post there was something to do with the railway, which just crossed over the road about 50 yards in front of me. So on the road north coming out of Misson, we had the only level crossing on the line. It caused some controversy, unpopular, that people would have to wait for trains to pass. Crossing over the level crossing, we're then to an area which is marked on old maps as a goods yard. Here you can see the buffers just before the road near Misson. So this was the area where really the functioning part of the railway began and ended, between Bawtry and Misson. The railway did extend onto Haxey but was rarely used. You can see it here where it is being decommissioned. The lines are still in place, soon to be taken up. And if you go down this lane, possibly about 200 yards, you'll come to a slab of concrete that was possibly part of that old goods yard. And you can see on this 1950 map where those sidings were before crossing the road. So we find that piece of concrete on the ground just on the right here, have an investigation of it, and then we think about making our way towards the next available part of the line, because if you carry on in this direction it becomes obsolete, it runs out. So just parked in the village of Westwood Side, right on the edge, and I believe if we just go out to the village and take a right, we'll come to another existing part of the railway. So we're now in Lincolnshire. A little challenge for you. If you know of any railway that was just 8 miles long that went through 3 counties, then let us know in the comments below. If there isn't one, also let us know that this railway was unique. About to cross a line, still very much in use. There's Misterton station in that direction and Finningley in that direction, although Finningley is no longer still used as a railway stop. And neither is Misterton for that matter. So I think after about 1.5 miles from Westwood Side village, we've come to the line of the old railway. You can just see that embankment and that line of trees there, and over to the other side too. So one of the few remaining traces of the Bawtry and Haxey Railway we've just uncovered. When we were doing the research for this video, there were reports that this part of the line had been taken up during the First World War and taken over to France to use for transporting troops and munitions, but we could find no hard evidence of it, and this part of the line was still very much in place up till its closure. As we said, it was just very rarely used, just trucks kept at Haxey. So there is a public footpath sign there which indicates we can walk a little bit this way along the railway, so let's see how far we can get. How far we can get is a few hundred yards, as you can see by comparing a modern map with one from the 1950s. So we're actually walking now along the old track bed of the Bawtry Haxey Railway, one of the few remaining accessible bits and one of the few remaining visible parts of this very short-lived railway.
So apart from the line of trees, there's no other evidence currently of there being a railway here.
In doing our research for this video, we came across no major incidents or accidents that occurred on this branch line. That may be because the speed limit varied between about 15 miles an hour and 25 miles an hour, and there were no passenger stations for people to have any mishaps on. It appears this line is now enjoyed by rabbits alone. When you think about the various fates of our abandoned railways, it does make you think. I mean, some are still running as railways, like the East Somerset Railway we were at the other week, with trains running and tourists there and people really appreciating the railway heritage, very much alive.
Yes, and some old lines have been turned into usable trails, like the Woodhead one near us.
Yes, still plenty of evidence there of railway action, the viaducts, the tunnels. Yeah, others were visited, like the old Wirral Way, where we were a few weeks ago, have display boards to tell you about everything that happened, and others like this, well, it hardly left a trace on the landscape. If you didn't know what you were looking for, you'd hardly know that this was an old railway line. Very short-lived and almost fading back into nature. Yeah, I mean, you've got the odd concrete block, haven't you, here, that might have been something to do with the railway, but really, really hard to tell. We think it was the signal post shown here on this 1950 map. And on the other side, not even a public footpath, just overgrown. So we think that path, which takes the line of the railway, peters out into a working farm. So now we're going to go over to the village of Haxey, where the line ended, and see what evidence we can find of it over there. But before we do that, we realised we'd left out a couple of pieces of remaining evidence of the railway. So we returned the following weekend to investigate them. It was mentioned that when the railway was being built, there was one bridge on the entire line, and I can only think it was here on Tyndallbank Lane, which is quite a way out of Misson and maybe a mile or so to the end point of the line at Haxey Junction. So we've got an embankment there, that stops dead, a long country lane going off behind me, so which would have the railway coming from that direction. And a little further along the road we found more substantial remains of a different railway bridge. We can see here, just off Tyndale Bank Road, the bridge that was built to take the railway across this farm path. So that was one of two bones of contention alongside the crossing at Misson that was unpopular, that occurred during the building of this railway. Got some interest here from these alpacas. But yeah, you can see where the bricks used to infill here are starting to collapse on this side. Some concrete being used to reinforce here, also going. But yes, a few feet above my head would have run the Bawtry and Haxey Light Railway. Thank you. Please like and subscribe.
We now move on to Journey's End at Haxey Junction, and here you can see the old line bend away to our left.
So we've reached the end of the line here at Haxey Junction Station, which is 8 miles from Bawtry. We can see the odd building still remaining from the railway station. Odd pieces we can see of sleepers, and we think that the Bawtry Haxey Light Railway came in this direction, linking to the station. So there are actually 3 railways conjoined here, one of which is still in operation, the Great Northern Line here. There was also the Isle of Axholme Light Railway, and in a future video we're going to explore that railway, because we did see just about a mile up the road some very interesting bridges and tunnels to do with that railway. So the Bawtry and Haxey Light Railway, short-lived and long forgotten, I think. There are very few traces in the landscape, but we do think we found most of them that are still there to explore.
Yes, it's been really interesting following the different sections of this railway. It's taken us to places that we wouldn't normally walk, so we've discovered lots of different areas around here. So yes, we hope that you've enjoyed what we've uncovered. So we hope you'll join us next time, where every journey begins with a path to the past.